welcome to the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour, the first one of 2021. I feel like I haven't done this in forever because it's been a few months, but I have been researching and developing a bunch of new recipes to share with y'all, and I'm not gonna lie, not all of them are great, but that's part of this journey that you get to go on with me. I want to talk about a few things before we get started today because I know we have some newcomers or new lurkers for those that aren't in the Zoom room. We love you either way, or I love you either way. But I just do a lot of recipe development and present cocktails as I see fit. Sometimes they're still works in progress. Sometimes they are what I deem to be delicious as is. Today, I thought I'd start off nice and easy and do just some variations on some classics, something to get our toes a little wet now that we're in the new year. But before we get started, I did want to go over the new format we'll be doing this year and all the things you can expect, which could change. Who knows? The world is still crazy. So for the process moving forward, I will be posting or attempting to post a monthly calendar with weekly shopping lists on the Underground Cooking Club page on Facebook. Also, if you would like to join the private group on Facebook, the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour, sometimes we swap tips and stuff in there, and there's a little bit more access to the Chandler hotline, I guess, if you will. Zoom room access is open for $5 a month. You can attend 4 classes, easy peasy. But if that's not within your budget, that's entirely okay. The Zoom streams live on Facebook in real time, and then I upload it to Facebook whenever I remember to because I have a very hectic life. But they're always available for rewatch. Now, with the new format, I'm going to try and stay super focused. So instead of trying to pay attention to this and the Facebook, I'll only be answering real time questions within the Zoom room, and then I will be reviewing the Facebook later if there were any questions that popped up. So if you ever wanted to like mix along, Zoom room is the place to be. Also, I recently joined TikTok. I'm in that part of my work life now. We don't have to talk about it. It's mildly shameful. But I do try to post videos every single day of the week, except Sundays because we do this. And it's a bunch of cocktail stuff. TikTok has hated me for the last 2 days. I can't post anything. So I'm sorry if you are currently following me on TikTok. But yes, TikTok is the same handle at Pandemic Pinup. On Instagram is where the recipes get posted, also at Pandemic Pinup. And those usually get posted a day or two after the class with photos, all the specs, and so forth. And then, like I said, YouTube's available for rewatch, and Facebook is available for live watching in real time. So today we're going to be doing Riff Raffs, which is what I'm calling variations on classics. Very simple, well-known cocktails to people who are first in the mixology world, but not necessarily to everybody. There's all kinds of bars, cocktails, styles of bartenders. You have party bars, you have dive bars, you have craft cocktail bars. But a lot of the cocktails that have made it through the years are very, very old, from the 1800s or the 1920s, pre-prohibition. And those are kind of things that we're going to revisit with modern twists. So I thought we would take a walk down Louisiana and go to visit the Vieux Carre, which is a French inspired cocktail, and it means old square. So usually you'll notice that the build for the classic Vieux Carre is very similar to what I'm doing now. And now the riffs that we're doing today are not my personal recipes. So if you don't like them, I don't care. But they're fairly tasty. They are very strongly flavored, very bold flavor profiles. Oh, sweet, we have someone popping in. Hello, Lasagna. But the Vieux Carre is usually rye whiskey, sweet vermouth, a little bit of Benedictine, and some bitters. And I'm going to be doing a very mild drink called the Jeunne Carre, which means young square. These are terrible names. I don't know where people came up with names back in the day. These are terrible names. But we're going to be using a split base of rye whiskey and brandy, not cognac. Still using the Benedictine, and traditionally it usually has Peychaud's bitters, but I'll be using Angostura bitters. So usually when your cocktail ingredients are all spirits and no juices are involved, it would be a stirred cocktail. So you will need a mixing glass if you don't have these cool tools at home. You can use a mason jar, you can use a Yeti cup, whatever you have that looks like a tall glass with some walls on it. So what we're going to do is you'll have the rye whiskey of your choice. Personally, I prefer a little bit of a softer rye with the Jeunne Carre, just because we'll be using Carpano vermouth, which is really, really rich in flavor. We'll be using some Angostura bitters, which are also like heavy on the spice notes. So sometimes if you use a really bold, spicy rye, it's just a lot going on. I find that the notes from the Carpano and the Angostura playing together are much more pleasant for me. So we will be using 1 ounce of rye whiskey. I have a French brandy I've been working with lately. I'm not brand specific. I'm not sponsored by anybody. So use whatever brandy you have at home. And if you don't have brandy, use cognac. They're close enough. They're not exactly the same. But we don't have to talk about that today. That could be in a later class. Who knows? Sometimes I teach things. Sometimes I just do things. So we're going to use those. And then we're going to use Carpano Antica. So 1 ounce of rye whiskey, 1 ounce of my brandy, 1 ounce of the vermouth. So far, it's a cocktail. And then we're going to use Dom Benedictine, which is like a sweet herbal liqueur. We're just going to use a bar spoon's worth. Pull that. And then we're going to go heavy on the bitters. So we're going to use 5 dashes of Angostura bitters, which I know sounds like a lot, but Carpano Antica is a very rich flavor, right? It's like the difference between butter and margarine. They both have like fatty notes, they both get the job done, but there are other sweet vermouths out there that are a little lighter in flavor than Carpano. So with that richness, we're trying to balance it out with the addition of so many bitters. So when all of those are in there, we're going to add some ice. If you are tuning in and also want some help finessing your cocktail skills, whether it's shaking or learning how to make garnishes, how to stir, all of those things. Like I said, I do have the TikTok videos, but I've also recently collaborated with Cocktail and Sons, a really cool company out of Louisiana, and they have the basics, which is all of the how-tos to really hone your skills if you're a home bartender. So you can hop over to their YouTube page or their Instagram page and check out that videos. As a quick recap, to stir a cocktail, you kind of hold your spoon like a pencil. I like to hold it here between my index and my middle finger. Some people prefer to hold it between their middle finger and their ring finger. It's just kind of trial and error until you figure out your style. But you always insert your spoon with the ladle part towards the back, facing the inside of your glass, and you kind of just use your ring. And so for this cocktail, you want to stir it. I hate giving like specific numbers because it's really dependent on your ice, but let's say about 20 seconds. Ice is not created equal. You can absolutely use the ice that you have in your refrigerator or your freezer. We don't have to have like special ice, but different ice shapes dilute differently. The smaller the ice, the faster it dilutes. So once your ice starts to move on where it makes it hard to maintain like this swirl that you've got going, that's a pretty good indication that you're good and close. Also, if you touch your glass and it's really cold, that's a good indication. So we're gonna have that. I have a rocks glass that I've chosen. And for this one, we are going to use big format ice for these fancy cubes. You don't really have to use these, but bigger cubes dilute faster and will help maintain the flavor profile, not watered down while I'm drinking this Jeunne Carre. So I'm going to strain that directly over my large ice cube. We don't get crazy fancy here on the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour. I know Clear Ice is a thing. All kinds of stuff. Kind of for that. That's time for drinking. So we're going to use a lemon twist. Diffuse take a large piece of swath off of a lemon. You want to try not to get a ton of the pith, pith being the white part that makes things extra bitter. And then when you're going to do a twist, you want to hold it above your glass and literally just kind of twist it like so. And those oils will go right over your glass and you can put them in there. And that's Jeunne Carre. Very, very easy. I will say, just watch out if you're not really versed in like really alcohol forward cocktails. This is not going to be your cup of tea. But if you like old fashions, Manhattans, Negronis, definitely those are the flavors we're kind of going for today, like bitter, bold, strong, boozy. Not all cocktails are like that, but you do that. So that is the young square, not the old square. I'm just that hit to be square. It's like I have to listen to that after this class so that I get it out of my brain. So the next cocktail we're going to make today is called the Negroni Giallo, which is a Negroni, and Giallo means yellow in Italian. So it's just a yellow Negroni. And it's yellow because of the liqueur named Suze, which is a really pretty bitter liqueur, which is really interesting. I'm going to explore the flavors of bitterness with y'all later this year. But bitterness is one of those flavors that has to be contrasted with either acidity or sweet for most palates to enjoy it. But other cultures outside of the United States really tend to enjoy bitter flavor profiles. I like bitter flavor profiles, but I also have like there's some bitterness that's just a little too much for me. But Suze is really nice. It's gentian forward, which is a really cool plant. Look it up. Super neat. Lots of cool stuff you can do with it. Not really common within our culture or our cuisine, but definitely common in a lot of places of Europe. So for the Negroni, let's talk ratios, because this is a huge argument among many in the bartending world. I'm here to tell you, make whatever you want to make it. But there's a lot of different ratios or spec that people use. Some people take the core base spirit, which is usually gin, and make that the larger portion, and then the other ones are kind of complements. There's also people that are of the family that equal parts or die is the way to go. Algie agrees, equal parts or die. And usually I agree as well. It does kind of depend on your ingredients. So most of the time, a Negroni will involve a gin, some kind of bitter red liqueur, very often Campari, and then it'll have some kind of like vermouth in it, sometimes white, sometimes red. There's a ton of variations. You can make it with tequila, you can make it with whiskey. I love to send mine out for Aperol because I am an Aperol junkie. I love that stuff. But sometimes if you don't find the right pairings, those ratios of equal parts aren't going to be able to blend very well. So if you don't know what you're blending together and how to make them work, equal parts is really difficult. So the Negroni Giallo, when I was introduced to it, it is a gin and a Suze base with white vermouth Negroni, and the ratios are not equal parts. However, very much like the equal parts Negronis. So I kind of tried to play around with it and see if it was viable, and I think it's actually more pleasant with equal parts. So I'm going to just give you my version of the Negroni Giallo, and then tell you what the other specs were in case you would like to try it. So this is also a stirred cocktail. My mother has messaged me that the my glasses are reflecting the light. I know. I can't help that. Sorry. There you can see my eyes, Mom. There. Sorry. So for the Negroni Giallo, it's going to be equal parts if you're doing the Chandler version. So we're going to be using 1 ounce of gin. There we go. Back on there. Okay. LG, can you hear me out there?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Seemed like I was frozen for a second. All is good. So I have a local Austin gin. You can use any gin you like. Gin is a very polarizing spirit. I think just because we don't really have a whole lot of modern education on how to drink it. A lot has been done with whiskey and tequila, but I feel like gin is kind of coming back into its own. Not all gins are created equal. Like think of gin the way you think of tea. Chamomile tea is wildly different from chai. Chai is wildly different from like green tea. And just in the category of green tea, there's a ton of different flavor profiles you can find. So when it comes to gin, most people are familiar with Tanqueray, Sapphire, Beefeater. Mostly those have like a really strong juniper flavor profile, which tends to remind people of like orange trees because that's where the juniper berry comes from. I love juniper. I love the flavor. I love the smell. Some people find it very aggressive or they just don't like it at all. There are so many different kinds of gin. Usually juniper is in the recipe, but you'll have some that are more citrusy, more floral, some that are more crisp and more vegetal, like with cucumber and notes of spices like cumin and other things. So if you're not sure what gin you like, or even if you like gin, don't go buy a big bottle. Go to your store that sells alcohol and buy a bunch of little minis and sample them all. So I recommend for this a citrusy gin if you can, but not just gin. So 1 ounce of gin, right in there. Then I'm going to be using 1 ounce of the Suze. That's the ginseng liqueur that I mentioned earlier. Put that in there. I don't know if y'all can see that yet, but I'm going to bring this close to the camera when I finish. The color on this is so beautiful. And then I'll be using dry white vermouth. Traditionally, it's made with Dolin Blanc. They are different, but if you're new to this, it's one of those things that the nuances become more apparent the more experience you have with spirits. The same way people can tell the difference between peppers when they cook with them quite often, but to a lot of people, they're either just spicy or taste like pepper. So vermouth and the choice of vermouth does matter, but if you can only get your hands on one brand, don't let that stop you. Go with what you can find. Just try to stay within the category, which in this case is dry and white. So 1 ounce of dry white vermouth. And then we're going to complement this with orange bitters. Ooh, we're going to do 3 drops. Ooh, okay. I said I was 3 drops. I forgot I took the stopper out of this because I have to use it for the next cocktail without the dropper. So preferably leave your dropper in. But yes, 3 drops of orange bitters. Same technique from the previous cocktail. So we're adding ice. Same thing. We're going to try and hold it like a pencil. And then stir that into our glass. And stir, stir, stir. And Negronis are a really interesting cocktail. They go really well with a lot of different foods. They work really well as an after dinner cocktail to help you digest, but they also work really well to help open up your appetite, which would be like an aperitif. The aperitifs and digestifs are 2 different types of drinks or alcohols or liqueurs that you can find in other parts of the world that either help open your appetite or help you digest. Later on this year, we'll be diving more into that too. So we've got that done. Got another little glass. Now, traditionally, most Negronis are served with a large format ice cube. A lot of the times as well, they'll have an entire orange slice in them. I really like it with the orange slice, like with the pulpy, fleshy part of the orange because it sits in my drink, soaks up some extra flavor, and then I have a really tasty snack. But this particular Negroni composition really makes me think of warmer weather. And I don't usually drink Negronis when it's super warm outside. So I like this over a smaller format ice. I would usually use cracked ice. We have ice problems currently in my household. We're still dealing with the aftermath of the Texas snow apocalypse from a couple weeks back. So I'm going to just use my standard fridge ice, no large format ice. The cube in there. Drink my absolutely beautiful yellow cocktail right over there. This one is also going to get a lemon twist. Now, I'm going to share with y'all one of my absolute pet peeves that I see a lot of bartenders do. There's not technically anything wrong with doing this, but I'm going to tell you why I don't like it. Never been to a craft cocktail bar and you see bartenders take like a swath of orange or lemon or whatever to decorate your cocktail or garnish it. You might see them kind of squeeze it like that, like so, like this, and then they'll get really fancy and like flourish and they'll like rub it on the glass and then stick it in your cocktail. There's nothing wrong with that. They're doing that so that those oils lay on top of your cocktail so you get hit in the nose with all those really pretty aromas, all the different things that combine from the drink and the citrus oils. However, some people have really sensitive mouths and lips, and our lips are like made of a really thin like skin, I guess. I'm not a doctor, but thinner than like the rest of the parts of our face. And I've had one too many people that have had an adverse reaction to those oils being directly put onto their mouth. So I always avoid rubbing my swath of citrus peel directly on the glass edge. What I do like, however, is to express the oils like I did, and then rub it on the outside of the glass. Because then what happens is you'll do that, rub it on the outside of the glass, look all fancy, pop that in there, and then when the person grabs that drink, goes to sip and enjoy it, puts it down, finishes it, whenever they leave your bar or your home or they're just conversing with you at some point, the aroma will stay on their hands, and it's just like a repeat of the experience. They get just brought back to the idea and thought of the drink, which was hopefully good. And hopefully, So that is just my personal preference. If you really want to rub those oils all over the rim of your glass, please do it. But that showed on the absolutely gorgeous yellow. It's just like this golden, like you can almost see that the lemon peel is almost camouflaged. Like it's super yellow. Oh, so pretty. So pretty. And it just the color of it makes me think of the seasons to come, spring and summer. Like if you took sunflowers and put them in glass, that's what color this is. And then moving on to our last cocktail of the day, Satan's Hour. So there's a cocktail called the Trinidad Sour, and there is a cocktail called the Angostura Sour. Both of those are based off of Angostura bitters. And sours are traditionally cocktails that have a base spirit, some kind of citrus, most of the time lemon, some kind of sweetener, a lot of the time simple syrup, and sometimes it will have the addition of egg white, sometimes it won't. Now, the Trinidad sour differs from the Angostura sour in the fact that the sweetener in the Trinidad sour is an orgeat, which is an almond syrup, whereas in the Angostura sour, it's a simple syrup. Both of these cocktails I find very appealing, but again, really bold flavors. Angostura bitters is based off of a lot of baking spices, cinnamon, allspice, anise. All of those things are really strong. So if you think about it, no one wants to go munch cinnamon stick. Very, very intense. If you do, then I would love to meet you because that's got to be the craziest thing I've ever heard. If you just chew on cinnamon stick. But these cocktails, once you add in that acidity, that sweetness, the egg white, what it does is it really kind of rounds out the flavor profile and makes it really, really appealing. Now you still get those bitter notes. So if you don't like bitter, not a good cocktail for you. However, the Trinidad sour versus the Angostura sour, I like the Trinidad sour more because the addition of orgeat, that almond syrup, there's something about that combination that it just absolutely always reminds me of the holidays. I love drinking Angostura sours when it's like Thanksgiving and Christmas time. The Satan sour, however, similar build, but we're going to be basing it off of orange bitters entirely. So it's going to sound absolutely crazy, so I want y'all to bear with me. Shaker is your tool. If you don't have a shaker, you can use a mason jar. As long as you have like a screw top. I've done things like this in Tupperware containers. As long as you can keep a firm grip and your lid sealed, you'll be fine. So we will be using orange bitters. And if you ever make cocktails with bitters, they're kind of like the seasoning of the cocktail world. Usually you use like a couple drops, like salt. Use a few pinches of salt, maybe a quarter teaspoon here and there. But for the Trinidad sour, the Angostura sour, and in this case, the Satan sour, we'll be using an ounce of bitters. It's a lot. It's a lot of bitters, guys. So for reference, bitters usually have an alcoholic content. Sometimes it's stated. I think fees, I don't want to say that I know exactly what it is, but I think I looked it up one time and it was like 20% or something. So Angostura bitters are 44.7% alcohol, which is equivalent to a lot of the bottles of whiskey or rum you see on the market. But these tiny little bottles, you only use one or two drops. So you're not losing your alcohol content by using bitters, but you are gaining a lot of very deep flavor. So we're going to be using an ounce and a half of our orange bitters, and I remove the stopper just because if you try to do this with the little dropper in there, it gets really aggravating because it's over 100 little drops. So you're just sitting here, shake, 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 and it just, if you have to make a lot of these, it's not worth it. Just take out the little thing and put it back in. So we have an ounce and a half of our orange bitters. We're going to use a 3/4 ounce of unsweetened cranberry juice. You can make this with just regular cranberry juice or cranberry cocktail. However, it's up to you later to play with the simple syrup. So I prefer to start, if possible, with unsweetened juices and add my own sugar. So 3/4 ounce, put that in there. Then we're going to use a 3/4 ounce of simple syrup. I've used as much as an ounce for more sensitive palates. Again, it's not going to kill the bitter. It's just going to kind of round it out a little bit more. And then we're going to add in the eggs. Now we've entered into the territory of yet another very discussion within the mixology world, which is how do you shake an egg white cocktail? There's something called the dry shake, which is my preferred method, and there's something called the reverse dry shake, which is yeah, no, I'm kidding. It's not dumb. I just don't like it, and I'm going to tell you why. So for the dry shake, you put your ingredients in the shaker like this. I would close my shaker, shake it, and then open it, add ice, and shake again. And what that does is break up the proteins in the egg white, helps them foam up, get really nice and frothy, trap all of the aroma and aromatics that are in my cocktail, and then pours out beautifully. The reverse dry shake is to put ice in the shaker, shake it, strain it so that you now have it without ice, and then shake it again, sans ice. Now, I have conducted that experiment numerous times. And yes, there is a minor difference in texture of the egg white. Some people argue that it's better. I personally don't think so, but again, that is only my personal opinion. And it is a lot messier and a lot more complicated and requires a lot more tools for an end result that I just don't think is worth it. So I say dry shake all day. That's what we're gonna do. So, numbers. Put the sugar together. Make sure you have a strong grip on your shakers, especially when they contain an egg white, because you are basically pressurizing the ingredients in this cocktail. So what happens is that egg white's expanding, getting air as it's shaking in there, and it's trying to grow. So if it's going to grow, it's going to try and open your shaker. So you can shake this for anywhere from about 15 to 20 seconds. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. If you feel like you're starting to lose control of your shaker, just go ahead and stop. But once you've shaken it for approximately that amount of time, open it. Like that. And then you do the same 20, 10, 15 seconds. This is more about dilution and chilling the cocktail because your egg white has already been broken up, but it is going to continue to foam and grow. My arms are tired today, guys. I did like a 9-hour brunch shift shaking a lot of cocktails. So I'm sorry if you're shaking things off to any of you. But once your cocktail is shaken and frothy, it is always a good idea to double strain your egg white cocktails. Just because sometimes, if you've ever even just made like a fried egg, sometimes there'll be that little squiggly, for lack of a better term. I actually know the term is, but I don't want to gross anybody out. But there's a little squiggly in the egg. So then, if that is for some reason not broken up, you'll be able to catch it. It's a double strain. So I'm using a regular strainer, also known as a Hawthorne, and a fine mesh strainer. And we're just going to strain that into this cocktail glass. And then we're gonna now the preferred garnish for the Satan sour is a really obnoxiously sized orange rim. So I'm gonna try to peel something super long. And you can do something called manicuring, which I'm not going to do right now, but it would mean that you take this strip, put it on a chopping board, trim up the edges so it's more of like a rectangle so that when you roll it up or twist it or whatever, it just looks cleaner and more professional. I like the really organic shape of things. I'm fascinated by them as a chef and a bartender. I just love the way things look and how we can change them. So I like both manicured and non-manicured, but I kind of have a sweet spot for non-manicured garnishes. So I am going to express a little bit of the orange oils for my cocktail. And then wrap this insanely large ribbon that is big for literally no reason. And then skewer it so it doesn't unroll and just demolish my cocktail. And then I'm just garnish. I think how big that is in comparison to the glass, like that's wild. But that, ladies and gents, is Peyton's. And it has occurred to me that I did not share the classic specs for the Negroni Giallo. So in case you did want to try that with the other measurements, it's usually 2 ounces of gin, a 3/4 ounce of the Suze, and a 3/4 ounce of the dry vermouth and 6 drops of orange bitters, not 3. So feel free to play with those ratios, my ratios, your own ratios. Get crazy, as Miss Frizzle said. Make mistakes, get messy, something like that. But that concludes our class today. I'm really, really excited to share with you guys the amount of work that I've been doing, the development I've been working on. I think for this month, we have the spring class coming up. Today or yesterday was the first official day of spring. So we'll be exploring cocktails that have seasonal ingredients. We'll be trying to redefine brunch cocktails. And then throughout the year, we'll be doing really, really neat things. We'll celebrate some holidays. We'll do things with tea, with coffee. We'll visit specific bottles that are difficult for people to make a bunch of different cocktails on. Like last year, we did Blue Curacao, we did Galliano, which are only really featured in a select few cocktails. So then some people pigeonhole it and it doesn't really get explored very often. So please, if you have anything you'd like me to work with, if you'd like to see something specific, please reach out and let me know. But I hope you conduct experiments with these cocktails today. The recipes will be on Instagram within a couple days. The rewatch available on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you guys next Sunday. Have a lovely rest of your day.